Well, good morning. Won't she make a great Member of Parliament for Telford? Well, ladies and gentlemen, 13 long years of a Labour government. 3 whole terms. 13 years of our communities blighted by antisocial behaviour and troublemakers hanging around on street corners. 13 years of people thinking twice before going out into town on a Saturday night, of older people wondering if they're safe walking home with their pension money. 13 years of victims being so let down by their experience of the criminal justice system, it was almost like being a victim all over again. 13 years when Labour could have given you the justice system you deserve. And you know, in all those years, they didn't. Well, now there are no more excuses. Now, when I stood on this platform 2 years ago, I made a commitment to you as the new Justice Secretary. I made a commitment that we would have a criminal justice system that was for the honest, law-abiding majority. I told you we'd have a criminal justice system that would be on your side, that it would give you peace of mind, that we would stop the thugs who thought they could just keep on getting away with it. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? We are making a difference in the years we've had in government. Under this government, if you commit a crime, you are more likely to be caught and charged. You're more likely to go to prison. You will go there for longer, and it will cost the hard-working taxpayer less to keep you there. Now, if you commit 2 serious sexual or violent offences, you'll get an automatic life sentence. You know, that's what we mean by 2 strikes and you're out. We've toughened community sentences so they contain proper punishments. You know, unbelievably, under Labour, they didn't. We have stopped prisoners claiming legal aid, paid for by all of you as hard-working taxpayers, because they don't like the prison they're in. Our homes are where we should feel safest. And that's why we kept our promise. We've made it clear that if a homeowner confronts a burglar in their home, the law is now firmly on their side. It's also why we dealt with another of the things that frustrates all of us. We made residential squatting a criminal offence, meaning those who do it can go to prison as opposed to nothing happening at all. And there are more changes on the way. You're going to hear a lot from Theresa May this morning about terrorism. Well, for terrorists convicted of offences like weapons training, the sentence is going up from 14 years to life. We have to do whatever's necessary. We have to protect our country from those who would harm us. And we're also cracking down on the cautions culture that Labour allowed to flourish. We are scrapping the simple caution for carrying a knife. You know, what possible reason is there for a young man going to the pub on a Saturday night to have a blade in his pocket? No excuses, no more cautions. And we're changing the rules so that the same thugs don't keep getting the same cautions time and again for the same bad behaviour, especially when it was always clear a slap on the wrist was never going to be enough to make them change their ways. And we're scrapping the use of cautions for the most serious crimes, unless the circumstances are really exceptional. You know, it should never have been the case that you could mug someone, burgle them, rape them, and just get off all but scot-free. That, ladies and gentlemen, is now changing. And let's not forget the most important people in our criminal justice system, the victims, many of whom have been so badly failed by it before. Now, we've already introduced a widely acclaimed victims code, but the next Conservative government will go much further. We'll introduce a victims law to set victims' rights in statutes. We will end the situation where victims are often the forgotten people in bringing criminals to justice. We're investing millions of pounds in improving the experience victims have in court. You know, the last thing we want to do is to compound the trauma they have already suffered. And we're dealing with another of the frustrations as well. We are making sure that lawyers dealing with vulnerable child victims or victims of serious sexual offences are properly trained. They have got to be able to conduct those cases in a sensitive way. And there's more. When you need support in the aftermath of a crime, we are making it easier than ever before to find it. So we're going to launch a new national information service, a single point of contact, a single telephone number and website, so that everyone who's a victim of crime has a simple place to go to find out what help is available to them. And we've also funded all the additional rape support centres we said we would. It's hugely important. There are now 86 across the country. Coming next, a new service to better support male rape victims. We've also substantially increased the amount of money going to victim services. And you know what? It's being paid for by the criminals, not the taxpayers. That's the right thing to do. And let's be clear as Conservatives, we will never lose sight of the fact that our system should be about the rights of the victims and not the rights of the offender. When I stood in front of you those 2 years ago, I was also very clear about something else. Our party should always be the party of law and order. Tough punishments for those who commit crimes, standing on the side of the victims, enough prison places for the offenders who should be inside. By the time of the election next year, we will have 3,000 more adult male prison places than we inherited from the last government. Because remember what Labour did. They failed to provide enough prison places. So what did they do? They released thousands of violent offenders early. They left them to roam the streets, committing crime after crime when those people should have been inside. That's what Labour is really like in government. We've also toughened the regime in our prisons. There's no Sky Sports football on a Sunday afternoon or 18-certificate DVDs. Those who misbehave lose the TVs from their cells or end up back in prison uniforms. It is, ladies and gentlemen, no longer the case that we have prisons that look like holiday camps. But that is not enough in today's world. It is not enough just to be tough. Our prisons also need to be places that start to change the lives of those inside in a more positive way. You know, actually, that's where we need to be as a party. Tough, but compassionate. So we are working to make our prison system a more constructive place for those who are there. It's less crowded than it was under Labour. There are fewer assaults than under Labour. Absconds from open prisons are far lower than under Labour. We've introduced more work to our prisons. You know, in the past year, I've visited workshops making electric lights, recycling materials for reuse in the prisons, refurbishing kitchen equipment, making garden benches, growing food, baking bread, plastering walls. And we're also on track to see a record number of offenders participating in learning. That's something I want to see continue. We're also changing things in our youth facilities too. There will be double the amount of education each week in youth offender institutions. And we're opening a new kind of institution, a secure college, to take that reform one step further. But there's a tougher and more regimented side too. We've introduced a lights-out policy in young offender institutions to give those young people more of a structure and discipline to their day. And we are getting rid of PlayStations and Xboxes from cells there too. You know, I don't think any young person in detention should be sitting up all night playing computer games. You know, when I talk to young offenders, they always say the same thing. They know that being able to get a job on the outside will be the difference between getting sucked into a life of crime or going straight. What we are doing as a party is working towards helping them achieve that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me put it very clearly on record that it is thanks to the excellent staff in our prisons that all of this has been delivered against a backdrop of huge financial constraint. There's a long way to go, but getting more work and more education into our prisons is exactly the sort of thing we should be doing and we will be doing in the next Conservative government. I'd also like to thank my team in the Ministry of Justice, the civil servants and my ministerial team for what they're doing for me and for our country. My ministerial team in the front row here, Shailesh Vara, Edward Fawkes, Mike Penning, Andrew Salou, Ben Wallace, our PPSs Stephen Metcalf and Steve Bryan, as well as a whole range of backbenchers who work so hard to help us. Too many to mention, but just to pick out four: Nick Dubois, Bob Neal, Simon Reevell, Henry Bellingham. We owe a huge amount to them. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a round of applause. But there's one big challenge in our prisons which has yet to be properly addressed, and which will be the next big reform challenge for my department: mental health. Another reason we need 5 more years. Thankfully, those huge red brick asylums of the past have gone. Years ago, as a society, we locked people up in them that should never have been there. But today, far too many people with acute mental health problems are found in a different kind of institution, in our prisons. And you know, when I visit the secure units in our prisons, I am both shocked and impressed by the scale of the challenge and the dedication of our staff in dealing with some deeply troubled people. Too many people self-harm, too many take their own lives, and more often than not, mental health is a key part of the problem. We already work closely with the NHS to provide support and treatment across the prison estate. But I think it is time to step up our response to that challenge. I want to take us to a point where we have specialist centres in our prison system where we can concentrate our best mental health expertise. That will be a priority for the next Conservative government. We live in a society where a higher and higher proportion of victims suffer at the hands of those who've been in the system many times before. The system's got to be effective, it has to make the right interventions, and only then can we stop the same people coming back time and again, having caused more harm to themselves and others. Now, the good news: today, crime in Britain's falling. It's at its lowest rate for years. We have fewer first-time entrants into the criminal justice system. That is real progress. But we also have a hard core of persistent criminals going round and round and round our system in a cycle that never seems to break. And that is something we really have to deal with. We have to address that stubbornly high reoffending rate. It costs us £13 billion a year, to say nothing of the emotional and mental toll on victims. And yet, you know, in this country today, if you go to jail for less than 12 months, you're released onto the streets with £46 in your pocket, no guidance, no supervision, no mentoring, no nothing. And almost 60% of those serving short sentences will reoffend within a year, sometimes back behind bars within weeks or months of being let out of prison in the first place. And then their crimes get worse and worse until the sentences are long enough to keep them off the streets for years. And even then, there's inadequate planning for release, no proper through-the-gate support, no requirement to continue rehab outside prison. Ladies and gentlemen, these are failings that cannot remain unaddressed. And that is why we have embarked on a massive programme of reform to our prisons and to our probation system. And by next year, we will have plugged these glaring gaps. For the first time in recent history, every single offender released from custody will receive a year's statutory supervision in the community. Our prison system will be reshaped with a network of prisons that will specialise in preparing offenders for release into the community. Most prisoners will spend the last few months of their sentences here to prepare for release in the area they will be living in. And that means it'll be possible to have a proper through-the-gate rehabilitation service, run by the same organisations inside and outside the prison. It is our best chance of stopping some of our most challenged people falling through the cracks all over again. And I want to put on record here again my thanks to the probation staff who are working so hard on the ground, preparing the way for these changes. And there's another thing I want to make sure when offenders are on their way back to the outside. I share your frustration with the way sentencing works in this country. We've all had these conversations before. I think 10 years should mean 10 years. But we know that when a judge says 10 years to a criminal, it actually means 5 years inside, 5 years on licence back in the community. Last year, I said to you we would start to change that. We are keeping that commitment. From early next year, it will be the law that the most serious offenders will lose the right to automatic early release, and they will have to persuade the parole board that they are safe to be released even a day before the end of their sentences. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is one other important issue I want to touch on today. We are a party that supports real human rights, a party that abhors the terrible things done in countries like North Korea, a party that will always fight to support change that ends the brutality of dictatorship around the world. But the human rights laws in our courts and in our country have moved a long, long way away from that. It is crazy that someone who poses a terrorist threat to this country should be able to claim their human rights to stay here. It is unacceptable that human rights laws should back those who break our immigration and planning rules, and yet all too often they ignore the rights of our own people, of you. And we should not be told by an international court, accountable to no one in this country, that we have to give votes to prisoners and stop sending the most brutal murderers to prison for the rest of their lives. Last year, I promised you that our manifesto would contain a clear plan to tackle this problem. It will. You will hear more about that plan very shortly. And Labour. Well, mustn't forget them. Do you know what? Last week, a conference in Manchester, guess what they said? They said they want more human rights laws, and they want those laws taught in our schools. Well, I have to say I look forward to having the argument at the election because I know what the people of this country really think. There's one other European issue to mention. You all know where I stand on our relationship with the EU, that we cannot carry on the way we are at the moment, and that David Cameron is right to say we need to renegotiate, and that then the people of this country need to have a vote on whether to be in or out. But I am very clear that there is no way that a Conservative government could ever accept Britain becoming part of a European justice system with European sentences for European crimes and courts run from Brussels and not the UK. Unbelievably, that's what many in Brussels want, and only Conservatives can be trusted to say no. Ladies and gentlemen, tougher penalties, more prison places, a stricter prison regime, but also improved resettlement and mentoring of offenders, more education and work inside, a new focus on mental health in prisons. All this happening at a time when we are having to make cutbacks to meet our overall budget targets. The great irony of all of this is none of this happened under Labour in the years when money seemed not to be a problem. All of us, government and public alike, have had to make tough decisions and difficult sacrifices over the last few years to turn the country's finances around. We can't in any sense afford to return to a boom-bust way of doing things. Just imagine, back to Labour's higher taxes, back to Labour's out-of-control borrowing, back to Labour's wild and ineffective spending. All that we have achieved would be undone in a heartbeat if Ed Miliband were handed the keys to number 10 to carry out the bidding of the union bosses who bankrolled his way there. But there's something else that Labour can't be trusted with, and that is our criminal justice system. They let thousands of criminals go free early from prison. They let tens of thousands of offenders avoid court altogether. They rewarded offenders in prisons with Sky TV. And they introduced a Human Rights Act that all too often puts the offender first and our own law-abiding citizens last. And now, the only idea the Shadow Justice team seems to have come up with this time is to let off young men of 18 to 21 convicted of a crime who are doing community sentences instead of one behind bars. They have learned nothing. We have got to stop them. We cannot give them the chance to wreck things all over again. And it is a Conservative government, led by this Prime Minister, that will keep our communities safe. Nothing else will deliver what this country needs. And that is why all of us, every single one of us, needs to spend the next 6 months with our sleeves rolled up and with one single goal: a majority Conservative government. Thank you.